Hi, my name is Jeremy Frank, and I'm happy to welcome you to Opera Happy Hour for part 2 of our opera dance party. If you saw part 1 a few episodes ago, you know I mean dance party in the sense of how dance and opera intersect, not necessarily in showing you my own personal, very fancy dance moves. Last time, we talked about how composers use dance to depict character, but today we're going to explore a more global continuum of how dance plays an integral part in the art form of opera. At the end of this episode, you'll even get to see a world premiere performance of a dance created by young artist soprano Sylvia D'Eramo and her classically trained dancer brother Aaron. Now, dance is as old as humanity itself, and in fact, we could say that dance represents people's first language. If you've ever met new parents starting their babies with sign language before they're even able to speak, it's obvious that gesture, and by extension dance, are hardwired into the very seeds of our human existence. And while dance represents a kind of universal human language, one beautiful mystery about it is that 99% of the time, dance is inextricably bound to music. In fact, the ancient Greeks had a single word for both dance and poetry, musike, which meant the art of the muses. Looking at opera today, it's easy to get the impression that opera singers simply park and bark, or fix themselves in one position so that they can accomplish the Herculean feat of singing opera. Really, the art form's roots are not like that at all. In the early Baroque era, everyone was expected to sing and act and dance equally well. Nowadays, we would call a performer like Audra McDonald, who can do all three of those things very easily, a triple threat. But as the earliest operas by Monteverdi and Cavalli can attest, this idea is as old as the art form itself. It is part and parcel of the all-encompassing magic that opera can create when it's at its finest. The term dance itself can conjure up some very limiting images. Maybe you imagine dancing at the club like I do, or perhaps you're thinking about classical dance and you think about men dressed in tights and ballerinas in tutus. Maybe performance art springs to mind with performers scooping and slicing their way through space in avant-garde ways. The truth is, dance is all of that and a lot more, and all of it finds its way into opera. Today, we'll continue to explore a continuum from the most simple and abstract kinds of dance, where, quote unquote, a dance is simply a dance without any kind of story to tell, to the other end of the spectrum entirely, where every physical gesture and every breath blurs the line between choreography and acting, and where every move furthers the narrative of the story from the composer's point of view. In this kind of aesthetic, if you can't tell whether something was decided by the choreographer or the director, that's the whole point. Our motto at LA Opera is that we are greater than the sum of our arts. That means that everything about the art form, the dance, the music, the orchestra, the chorus, the set design, the painting, the props, the costumes, the lighting, all of it is a collaboration on a massive scale. It's what makes opera so very powerful, and when we work in an environment like that, it's critical for us to learn to translate our own ideas to someone else's language so that we can arrive at common goals together. I seem to have arrived at my toast before I told you about tonight's drink pairing, so let me get to that. Tonight I'll be having a whiskey sour, the old-fashioned kind with pasteurized egg, because it is a drink that is better than the sum of its parts. The whiskey is a little bit business, the lemon juice is a little bit tart, the simple syrup is a little bit sweet, the pasteurized egg gives it a little bit of frothy whimsy, and there's a cherry on top. So let me propose a toast to arriving at common goals together so that we can be greater than the sum of our parts. Cheers. The first stop on our continuum is dance as divertisement, which is just a fancy way of saying dance as a source of diversion or entertainment. In other words, this is the kind of dance that pretty much just looks like dance. Sometimes these little dance breaks last for as few as 2 or 3 minutes. They are completely ubiquitous throughout the operatic repertoire. For instance, you've got the mashup of dances that we talked about from Mozart's Don Giovanni. I played that example toward the end of episode 5. There's also a dance break at the beginning of the party scene in Verdi's La Traviata. And in the modern opera by Carlisle Floyd, Susanna, set in the South, there's an actual square dance. Now, during our last dance party, I mentioned that Mozart wrote quite a few dances and was a fantastic dancer himself. Tonight, I thought we would mine his music again with this excerpt from the Marriage of Figaro to demonstrate this kind of dance as pure entertainment. In the opera, toward the end of Act 3, the time of Susanna and Figaro's wedding finally arrives. There's a big wedding party going on, the chorus sings some happy tunes, and Figaro and Susanna share their first dance. As the wedding guests join in the dancing, the music suddenly goes from a happy major key to a shadowy minor key, and Mozart does something rather remarkable. He lets us, the audience, overhear Figaro and the Count's inner monologues. Figaro comments to himself as the Count receives a note requesting a romantic rendezvous and laughs at the awkwardness of his master. The Count, for his part, thinks he's outsmarted Figaro and brokered a secret affair with Figaro's new bride, Susanna. The graceful dance continues going the whole time. As I played this excerpt, I thought I'd raid LA Opera's beautiful production photo archive. So you'll see some images of actual singers and dancers in this production of Figaro, which were taken by Craig T. Matthew. Solita usanza, le donne fican laghi in ogni loco. Ah ah, capisco il gioco, un biglietto amoroso che gli dè nel passar qualche galante. Ed era sigillato da una spilla onde si punse il dito. Il narciso la cerca, oh che sordita! The next stop on our continuum is dance that focuses mostly on the emotional undertone of the dramatic scene it's part of. If you know the opera Salome, based on the provocative play by Oscar Wilde, you know that there is a very infamous dance, the Dance of the Seven Veils, which is essentially a striptease and is as risque today as it was when the opera had its premiere in 1905. Now, lest you think that this is just a tawdry dance, know that Salome and her lecherous stepfather, Herod, come directly to us from the text of the Bible. Salome is carnally obsessed with John the Baptist, who prophesies the coming of the Messiah. John, a man of God, wants nothing to do with her or her overtly sexual advances. With ripely dissonant orchestral music that could be an oral depiction of Freudian analysis, Strauss colorfully depicts Salome as she entices and manipulates Herod, her stepdad. She promises to strip naked if he'll only reward her with the severed head of John the Baptist when she's done. This is hedonism, cruelty, and decadence on an unprecedented scale. In fact, in many ways, this is one of the first pieces to establish a shocking new modern era in classical music. By playing the first part of this excerpt, and only the first part, I also get a chance to demonstrate one of the biggest differences between how dancers and musicians understand music. We musicians count the number of beats in a measure of music, but dancers count the number of beats in an entire musical phrase. When music is predictable, this is a pretty easy gap to bridge. But when you have music pushing at the very edges of sanity, even the phrases themselves evade normal patterns. When we produced Salome a few seasons ago, the brilliant choreographer Peggy Hickey, who, by the way, has been a part of the LA Opera family as a dancer, a choreographer, and an assistant director since the very beginning of the company. I've known her for many years now. She worked on LA Opera's Grammy-winning Ghosts of Versailles, and she also worked on the Tony Award-winning Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. She's been amazing and an absolutely invaluable help to me as I researched today's show. Anyway, she and I had to kind of invent a dance calculus so that the singer and dancers could remember when to go where in the choreography to this very crazy music. As I play this excerpt, I'll show you some of the counting that we had to create, and then I'll let it go away, and I'll cut to some beautiful still images of the beginning only of this dance. In the excerpts, in the photographs that you're about to see, the choreography is, of course, by Peggy Hickey, and the photography is by Ken Howard. One, two, three, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. On the far end of our spectrum of how dance is used in opera, we end up at dance as Gestalt, which is a term used in psychology meaning an organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. Tricky what I did there, huh? In this approach, dance is the very living tapestry that highlights, reinforces, and depicts the music to the point that no gesture distracts from the whole. The first example that I'd like to play from this kind of dance comes from the opera Orpheus et Eurydice by Gluck, which LA Opera co-produced with Chicago's Joffrey Ballet in 2018, with choreography by the legendary John Neumeier. If you happen to have caught a different opera, the world premiere of Matthew Aucoin's opera Eurydice, in February, you know that both these operas have to do with the myth of Orpheus descending into Hades to charm the keepers of the underworld so that his newly deceased wife can return to the land of the living. That's actually all the plot that you need to know. What I do want to point out, though, is this. Gluck's writing alternates between songs with singing and strict ballet music with no words. And yet, in the production that we did in 2018, dance and singing are two sides of the same storytelling coin. One of the most famous dances is the Dance of the Blithe Spirits, which is famous for this beautiful flute solo, which I'll play on my right hand. And even through these beautiful still images by Ken Howard, you can sense that the depiction of Hades is not something to be feared in this production. Always. There is some scary music, but in this excerpt, you'll see that the afterlife is a place of peace and serenity. One of the most grand-scale operas that thrives when dance is used in this Gestalt approach is Aida, which, interestingly, is a piece about ancient Egypt, which was commissioned from Verdi by the actual Khedive of Egypt in the late 1860s. Dance is featured prominently in Aida, and I'd like to play two excerpts that highlight the ceremony, pomp, and pageantry of ancient Egypt. The first excerpt comes from the end of Act 1 in the Temple of Vulcan, where priests and priestesses invoke the god of creation, Ptah, to protect their warriors going into battle. As I play the dance of the sacred priestesses, you may notice some very unusual scales. We musicians would call them modes, but they follow different patterns than our Western European scales. Verdi uses them to depict ancient Egypt and its exotic rituals. At the very end of the dance, however, Verdi can't help but inadvertently reveal his Catholic roots by writing this perfectly straightforward Amen cadence like we talked about in episode 2. The choreography that is photographed by Robert Millard from both of these next excerpts is by our very own Peggy Hickey. Cheers. Next, I'd like to play an excerpt that depicts the triumphant return of the Egyptian army after battle. In the show, this is a massive procession with all the grandeur that can be possibly unleashed. The ballet is actually quite long, but it starts with a famous, recognizable tune known as the Triumphal March. One interesting aspect of this excerpt is that Verdi spared no expense and orchestrated this melody for 2 groups of 3 Egyptian trumpets. You can imagine my right hand as trumpety as it can be. The excerpt sounds something like this. It seems absolutely criminal to spend 2 entire episodes talking about dance as it pertains to vocal music without actually showing you some real dance. Now, don't get excited. I am not about to show you my dance moves, but I am thrilled to get to share a world premiere performance for you right now. As part of our LA Opera at Home initiative, young artist soprano Sylvia D'Eramo wanted to create performances in collaboration with her other artistic siblings. Her brother Aaron studied dance performance at Southern Methodist University and has performed with dance companies throughout Texas. Together, they had the idea to interpret the first song of Robert Schumann's Dichterliebe, or Poet's Love. The poem is called Im wunderschönen Monat Mai, and I'd kind of like the words to speak for themselves. So let me do a very brief English translation for you. In the wonderfully beautiful month of May, when all the flowers are bursting open, there, from within my own heart, my love bursts forth. In the wonderfully beautiful month of May, when all the birds sing, I also confessed to her my yearning and my longing. This weekend marks what would have been the end of LA Opera's 2019-2020 season, and I think it's a very strange coincidence indeed that the cloud cover that we Californians refer to as June gloom is still with us in the mornings here the last couple days. We're about to embark on the proper part of summer, and so I'm going to slow down production. You can expect a show kind of mid to late July and mid to late August, and then we'll resume again in the fall with a little bit more regularity. But before I go for a couple weeks, I want to leave you with this one thought. I think it's clear which side of the continuum I'm biased towards. So I really think dance is better when it forms a part of a gestalt. And actually not just dance. I think music is better and acting is better when it all serves a greater overarching purpose. And you, dear audience, play a part in that too, both when we're in the theater, and especially now when we are not in the theater. I know I've mentioned this several times, and people's lives have gone in lots of different kinds of directions, but if you are able to contribute to the LA Opera Relief Fund, now it's becoming even more important than ever. So please consider us for a donation. And if not, please continue checking out our other digital content. We feel your presence, even though we can't see your presence in real time exactly. I'm looking forward to a little bit of a vacation, and that actually brings me to the theme for my July show, which is going to be a virtual vacation, an opera vacation. So if you're feeling like my husband and I are, like we can't really go anywhere, I'll take you to some fun, adventurous ports, and we'll get away a little bit together. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and stay healthy, stay happy, and cheers.